welcome back for another ABE update, and this time it's from the 13th of August of this year, 2022, and it's quite a long one, so maybe I will, there's 3 paragraphs. As previously, I will read each paragraph and then offer my comments on each paragraph. Take it from there. Okay, here we go. Saturday, the 13th of August, 2022. You see, and what we say is that you are a multitude of consciousnesses. Now you see, this word is thrown around quite a lot, and this is not of definition of evolvement or conscious being. Consciousness is always being transferred, transformed, directed, redirected, allowed or not, here or there, but always never amiss and always whole. For consciousness does not come from a place, it is the place. It only ever gets transferred. There is no definition of good forces or evil forces, only where and how you direct and allow. For to allow all is neither good nor bad in what you defined these terms, and how we explain it as such, for you cannot be controlled by other forces only if you allow that you are. To not overtly state it as so, for what is your so-called evil is imbalance. And this may be but of now the way in which you work is the continuance. And this not be of directing and deciphering, but of allowance of all your threads. For you see, the way back home is not a central point of being, but the point of no point. The allowance of this, you see. And consciousness is in allowance, for you see, you are a multitude of, and in the allowance in this step relate, you evolve. A lot of things said in that first paragraph. So first, that we are a multitude of consciousnesses, and that there's been, this word consciousness has been thrown around a lot, and of course it's always trying to be defined. And in the definition of it's often incorrect. Consciousness in the material paradigm is a result of the brain activity. But what we've been talking about in these ABE dialogues is that consciousness is primary, and matter is a secondary manifestation of conscious energy. And so the body-mind is an apparatus that receives and filters and interprets, according to our conditioning and filters, that consciousness. And there's many aspects of that consciousness, although it's whole. And there can be a multitude of various states or levels of that consciousness within the whole of the consciousness. But you see, consciousness is always being transferred, transformed, directed, redirected. That's how it works. It's flowing, and it's being transferred, redirected. It's never static, and it's never contained. Surely not contained within a physical body, but it's moving through. It's only that we perceive it as being a projection of mind, which is like a false perception, a conditioning. In a sense, the body and mind comes from consciousness. It's only that we flip it over and perceive that consciousness comes from the body-mind, rather than the body-mind actually being coming from consciousness. And so that's why Abe says consciousness does not come from a place, it is a place. It's the place. It's all consciousness. It doesn't come from somewhere else. Consciousness is not projected from somewhere else, and then you get materiality. All is consciousness. And materiality is a kind of unfoldment of that. And that there's no definition of good or evil forces. It's how it is directed and allowed. So They didn't say there was no good or evil forces. They said, ABE said there's no definition of evil and good, because humanity and our anthropomorphic perceptions tends to personify evil and good. Like evil is this being, Satan. Good is that being, the saint. And we personify, but good and evil are aspects of forces, of consciousness. And so it's how it's moving, how it's allowed. So, for example, the river flows. When it flows, it's good fresh water. If the water flows into a small kind of inlet or a pond and can't move out, then the water stagnates and can become dirty, polluted water. So it depends how the consciousness is being allowed and flowed. It can come into a state where it can be what we call evil, because it's been a stagnation in its direction. And evil is an imbalance, and it's not in the directing but in the allowance. So again, a certain consciousness and forces of consciousness, when they're in imbalance, they can be what we would perceive as evil, but it's not a personification. It's a state that consciousness has found itself in, so to speak. And so consciousness is in allowance, not in stagnation. It must be in allowance. And it's a multitude of, it's all different levels of consciousness. And and we can perceive them operating in various ways. And we have to relate to those consciousness, to the allowance of, to evolve. And now move on to the second paragraph. And we continue this with great reverence to your points. You are your own being. Your purpose is what you say it is, and to align with what is true to you, you must allow yourself. Not splintered or divided, not working from the outside in, as in betterment of or claiming, not in expectation of other, but allowing yourself. This does not mean you close off, quite the opposite, that you do not allow a relation, but that you see it as that. But also, you see, allow this relational point to come and go. This is the continuance. Don't think as to what you've been told, that relation is protective, is somehow sterile. It is not so. Your heart is open in continuance. The point here is that it is not entangled and left, for in this would you only be allowing others. It is the allowance of yourselves, is it not? For it is to be the embodiment of, not the entanglement. If there are ones that seek this, that link up, if you will, and want that entanglement to remain but are aloof, allow yourself to draw back that thread of consciousness and simply gather and allow it from your own being to be it. You will know the feeling as you will feel adrift in your very own being, swayed, if you will. You are indeed points of relation, not points of entanglement. When you feel this, bring yourself back home and simply relate, for this is the symbol. If you do so wish, allow the exercise to allow you to gather those threads. But hear this does not create a bubble for you to protect, for in this you will not live in it. There is nothing to protect, if you will. Now here, what I sense that ABE is saying specifically is not to be falsely entangled in others or in aspects external to you, for this is a false relation. Abe starts saying that you are your own being. You must allow yourself, not splintered or divided or working from the outside, as in betterment, maybe external conditioning of betterment. You better yourself by doing this and doing that, and much as a lot of the kind of spiritual marketplace insists. Not in claiming others, but allowing yourself. So when Abe talks about splintered or divided, Abe usually refers that we give ourselves away, we attach to something external, we project onto something external. And Abe is saying here, you are your own being, allow yourself, don't be splintered by attaching onto these external points, whether it's practices of betterment or claiming things, external things, or allowing other people to claim you. And they say that don't think as what you've been told. Very important. Don't think as what you've been told. That sometimes relation is sterile. No, energy is not sterile. We relate to other energies. It's never sterile. But the problem is that there are others who are linking up to entanglement. And for me, that refers to the external world right now, is that there's a sense that the energies want us to be entangled with the kind of physical energies of the world, the energies of dissonance, the energies of chaos and fear and anxiety. These are entanglements. And Abe says is that the energy is embodiment. We can flow into other relations, we can embody them, but not entanglement. We don't get stuck or stagnated in other energies that are not useful to us. Abe says there are ones that seek this entanglement, that link up, if you will, and want that entanglement to remain. These are the forces of the world, we can say, that want this entanglement to remain. But Abe says, allow yourself to draw back that thread of consciousness. Simply gather it and allow it to come back to your own being. We are allowing a flow of consciousness. If we feel adrift, as Abe says, or being swayed, we bring it back. We don't get entangled in energies which are not useful or beneficial to us. We just bring it back. Don't get entangled. Bring yourself back home and simply relate. Bring yourself back to yourself. Relate with what flows to yourself. This does not create a bubble. Do not fear. If you bring your energies back home, it doesn't create a bubble. You are in a different resonance or different frequency from those entanglements. So you're not in them, but you're not in a bubble like away from the world and shutting yourself off. Consciousness is never shut off. You're just a different frequency from those entanglements. And you need to bring those energies back if you feel discomfort. And for the final shorter paragraph, what is to continue here is that in your points you will feel anger. You will feel disappointed and hurt and even betrayal. You are never outside of this in your form. For one to say, look inside yourself. When you feel this may divert you altogether, will it not? It is to allow and see, for your suffering can be in the not allowing it to be so. You are not immune to this, no matter how evolved you become. Consciousness wants to flow, does it not? See in yourself where you do so allow and where you do not. For this may be what you would call spiritual diversion, you see. And what we say here with great reverence now is you are the combinement of, you are human. That last sentence I think is also important. You are the combinement of, you are human. To be human is to be within a physical vessel, a physical body, and have the flow of consciousness coming through. Consciousness wants to flow, does it not? So we are experiencing a human body with the flow of consciousness. That's the combinment. And so because we are within a human body, we will feel anger, disappointment, hurt, betrayal, and maybe suffering. These are feelings, emotions, experiences that often the human body comes into contact with. And Abe says we're not immune to that no matter how evolved you become. It's okay to recognize that those emotions exist through the human vessel. Emotions of hurt and anger, disappointment. But to understand that is not to attach to it. To understand that these are part of our experiences, but do not overly suffer from attachment to those experiences. He says, your suffering can be in the not allowing it to be so. If we attach our consciousness onto certain emotions and we get stuck and stagnated in those experiences, our consciousness is not flowing and therefore we suffer more. Consciousness has to flow. Recognize that there are these emotions. Do not get stuck on them or stagnate consciousness. Allow it to keep on flowing. See where you do so allow and where you do not allow. This is what can be called spiritual diversion, using our terminology. This is when we get splintered, is when we have to step back and observe when we're allowing consciousness to flow, to relate, to experiencing, and when we are not allowing that and getting attached and entangled. Because having the human experience is a physical body with the consciousness, and therefore we have to navigate these experiences, but do not allow the conscious flow to stagnate onto physical bodily experiences only. Otherwise, our life experience and perception of the life experience will also stagnate, and we can suffer from that. So that is what I get my interpretation of that message. And so that's the final message of August. And so now we're coming very close to the end. Now we step into September. And for now, I don't have any more messages other than the one in September. And as I give you this message today, we are still in September. So there's still time. And thanks for listening thus far. Until next time. Cheers.